Yes, it was not the best of times. It was mainly the worst of times last week for the NFL predictions around these parts. And so today we are looking at trying to bounce back this week as we did, you know, I've done accountability episodes, and so it's important for me to let you know how we did. We did go 5-13, so it wasn't great. And look, I said not all. I wasn't super stoked on all of those. But those are still some that we got to improve upon a little bit here. So let's see if we can get this thing going and get it back to 500. So for those of you in the chat, will we get to a 500 mark this week? I think I might be using the predictions thing wrong, but if I am, sorry. Either way, let's get into this here. Denver taking on the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. The Bucs are favored by 6.5 points, and the total is at 40.5. When Denver has the football, it has looked very bad for them on offense so far this season. They have had some brutal turnovers and just been generally ineffective. I have this. So just before we get too far into it, I don't want to get too stat heavy because I think I did a little bit last year, but just a quick explainer of some of the stats that I look at for NFL and stats that I'm going to be referencing rather regularly here this year for NFL coverage. EPA per play. Or EPA per drop back, or EPA per run, is expected points average. And so every time you have the football, there is an expected amount of points that comes with that based off of how people in your same position have done over the last 1 billion years of football. And so if you have the ball at the 20, at your own 20 to start a drive, you are expected to get X amount of points. If you go out and make a 30-yard play that gets you to midfield, well, now that positioning, you are expected to get Y amount of points. And so the difference in those points is your expected points. They average that out over the game and see how everyone does. It's just kind of a bit more of an effectiveness of the offense. Also, there is success rate that I use. That one is if you get half of the yards to gain on first and second down, and if you get all the yards to gain on third, that is a success. So if you pass the ball for 5 yards on first down and it's 2nd and 5, look at that, we have a successful play. Same thing if you run it. If you run the ball for 2 yards on first down and it's 2nd and 8, that is an unsuccessful play. And then the last one that I use is DVOA. It is just an overall view of a team and an overall look at how efficient a team is, both on the offense and on the defensive side of things. So that's just a quick breakdown. So that's when I'm saying some of these things. Now you know. So Denver offense. Bad. They are 31st in EPA per dropback and 30th in passing success rate, which is kind of crazy when you think about it. When you just need a 5-yard pass on first down for a play to be deemed successful, and you are 30th in the NFL in that category, that is really bad. Their overall offense has a success rate of 31.5%. So when just 31% of your plays are being successful, that's a problem. The running game has been an issue in Denver that people have not really been assuming so far. They are 27th in EPA per run, 30th in rushing success rate, so the offense has really quite stalled. They're facing a Tampa Bay defense that I do think has some issues, but according to the stats, it's not great. I do think a lot of that is based off of week 1 and a shootout with Washington. So we don't need to get into all of them because I don't think they really tell the full story. On the Tampa Bay side, when they have the football, Baker has picked up right where he left off last year. This offense is really moving things very effectively and very efficiently. They are 14th in offensive DVOA right now. So middle of the pack, but still being able to move the ball. Denver's defense has actually done quite well. I will caution on that, though. They have played Seattle and they have played Tennessee. Now, Seattle's offense should be pretty good. Tennessee, just based on the turnovers that they have, not a great offense to start. So there is a little bit of, that's why we're not going super numbers heavy this week or any week. But there are a few concerns about this team and maybe the competition they face so far this year. In terms of Tampa Bay's offense, again, back to them, my concern is that it's pretty one-dimensional. Rachaad White hasn't been very good so far this year, and if you just know Baker's just going to be back there just slinging it, eventually teams are going to pick up on that. But overall, I have Tampa Bay winning this one, and I have Tampa Bay covering -6.5. Into the fantasy conversation about these. I don't know if you can trust anyone on the Denver Broncos. Knicks is absolutely a no, and probably shouldn't even be owned in leagues right now, in redraft leagues anyway. I wouldn't like to have to rely on their running backs. We talked about McLaughlin as a waiver wire ad. That's, not this week. Wouldn't want to be going with that. And that also didn't pay off really last week either. But I do think that he is going to become a bit more part of this offense as it goes along. While Javonte Williams, I think he is quite talented. He just hasn't really shown it so far this year. And so I'm trying to avoid all of those. They have a couple receivers who have been getting a few targets, but the targets aren't great. So right now, it is a wait and see at best for the Denver Broncos. On the Tampa Bay side, Baker probably isn't a great option this week. I just said that I'm waiting and seeing how good this Denver defense is in a difficult-ish matchup against Tampa Bay. So if you have another option, I would probably go that way. I don't love White again, but given where he was drafted, you probably have to trust him, and that's a problem. For the receivers, Evans and Godwin are studs, and you should probably be starting them every single week. On to the Houston Texans taking on the Minnesota Vikings. The Texans are 2-point favorites with the total sitting at 46. So let's start with when Houston has the ball. It was a little concerning how many issues they had moving the ball against Chicago last week. And I do think that the Bears defense is quite good. And so they are going to give you some problems at times. I don't like how stalled out things got when you don't have Joe Mixon running for 130 yards, but I do still think there's so much talent on this side. I do think that it wins out. Minnesota's defense has been strong to start the season. They rank second in defensive DVOA. They are fourth in defensive EPA and fourth in defensive EPA per dropback. That being said, they faced Daniel Jones in week 1, and they faced San Francisco without Christian McCaffrey in week 2. I talked about the home field advantage. I do think the defense gets some of that, but I don't know how actually great this defense is moving forward. This will be a very interesting test and a real kind of like, okay, let's see how real is Minnesota coming out of this game, and also how real actually are the Houston Texans. This is sneakily one of the best games of the week, I think. For Minnesota, when they have the ball, the offense has been off to a surprising start this season. And again, they played the Giants in week 1, but they played the 49ers in week 2, and that's a defense that I kind of trust and one that is pretty strong. So I do think that there is a option for this team to actually go out and put up some points here this week against the Houston defense that looked really good against Chicago. They did give up some big plays against Indy, and that's where I'm a little bit concerned. Not that Sam Darnold is a big play machine or anything like that, but I do think that there is some concern here with Sam Darnold, with this Houston offense giving up some of the big plays that they have. But overall, I do think the defense has looked good. They rank 4th in DVOA right now and 8th in defensive EPA per play. So it is a good defense. I don't know if they are as good as Chicago made them seem, where you can just blitz one and all of a sudden it just mass chaos ensues and Chicago doesn't know what the fuck to do with any of that. It becomes a bit of a thing. So we will see how they do there. But my overall pick is Houston -2. I just think they're the more talented team. And I know I could have done that last week, and Minnesota, them being the home side, gave us some pause in going with San Francisco in that matchup. But I do think that this week, Houston, given that they are healthy, are definitely the way to go. From a fantasy football standpoint, by the way, if you guys have any fantasy football questions you want to throw in the chat, I know, like, to say fantasy football expert would be a wild overstatement. But I did host a fantasy football radio show out here in Calgary for 3 years, 2 years, a bit of time anyway. And so I know-ish what I'm doing here. So if you have some fantasy football questions or just need another sounding board for fantasy football stuff, absolutely let me know in the chat. And I will entirely derail the format of the show to help your questions out. From a fantasy standpoint, though, you're starting your Texans this week, right? Like, I don't think you're sitting Stroud. You're not sitting Collins ever. Dell has been off to a bit of a slower start, but if he connects on that 50-yard pass against Chicago, I think we view a lot of things differently, actually. Both the Texans' offense, maybe even Chicago's defense, and a few fantasy options here. And Diggs, I do think you can put him in. The 2 red zone looks that he got in week 1 against Indy still kind of weigh in the mind a little bit. I would stay away from the running back situation if you can. Mixon, we'll see. And even if he is ready to go, Pierce doesn't seem like he's the guy, so it would be Cam Akers, who did seem like he lacked a bit of explosiveness last week. And so I would caution against using him. If you have to, you have to, but I would try to find a different back for you there. Up next, it is the game that everyone is calling the Spider-Man meme, as it is the LA Chargers taking on the Pittsburgh Steelers. Steelers are favored by 1 in this game. And as I'm saying this, because I have Joe Mixon in a lineup, Joe Mixon has been downgraded to doubtful. So certainly seems like it's Cam Akers in that spot. Hey, I would try to, I would try to not have to use Cam Akers. Also, I'm just realizing now, I forgot to give you the Minnesota side of things. I'm not trusting Sam Darnold as an option unless I have to. Jefferson, if he's healthy, you play him. Aaron Jones, probably a guy you should be starting anyway. Ty Chandler isn't at a point where you have to start him every week, but he is at a point where it's getting a little bit interesting. And if you wanted to, like, if you are in a super deep league and you just want to give it a go, Houston is 23rd in defensive rush success rate, so you can run on them a little bit. They also, it's a little bit skewed, right? Because they faced Jonathan Taylor in week 1, one of the best running backs in the league. Now, they faced DeAndre Swift last week. Not a whole lot going on there. And the offensive line isn't a help either. But I do wonder if Ty Chandler is a sneaky play in some deep leagues. On to, again, the Spider-Man meme game. It is the Chargers taking on the Pittsburgh Steelers. The Steelers are favored by a point, and the total is at an absolutely disgusting 36.5. That is absolutely gross. When the Chargers have the football, look, neither team's going to want to throw this one. The Chargers' run game has been very strong so far this year. They are 5th in rush EPA, or EPA per rush, sorry, and Dobbins has been absolutely electric until it gets to about the 40-yard mark, and then it starts to slow a little bit, but that's fine. Who wouldn't, right? Obviously, this is a very conservative passing attack, so the run game has been utilized so far. The one thing I will caution, and at this point, Dobbins, because it's back-to-back really big weeks, and because the Chargers are still going to be very stubborn about running the football, I do think you probably still have to start Dobbins in fantasy anyway. I will say, the Steelers' defense, a little bit better than the Raiders and the Panthers, who these guys were facing to start things off. So, just giving you a heads up that maybe this isn't going to be the bountiful running day that Dobbins has provided us so far. Also, on the Pittsburgh defensive side of things, the run defense is quite good. They faced Atlanta and Denver, both teams who I would suggest wanted to be a little bit run heavy, Atlanta, it became a little bit predictable because Kirk Cousins couldn't move in that game, but Bijan Robinson is quite good. And so when you have a run defense that is stepping up in the way that Pittsburgh's was able to, 4th in defensive EPA per rush, that's pretty impressive when you do that against them. And then Denver's a team that wants to run, and you would think that you would have a strong point from Williams. It's a little bit shaky. Or not a little bit shaky, sorry. You would think that would be something they would want to do, but Pittsburgh was able to lock it down. And so I do think that it is interesting, this kind of chess match. The one last part of it is the Chargers have the 3rd lowest early pass down rate in the NFL. I do think Pittsburgh has a chance to put the Chargers in some difficult situations in these games, where if they can shut down that run early, force Herbert into some 3rd and 8 type of situations. I think Herbert is very talented. I don't think the same for his receiving core, though. And when you can have Watt and those guys just ears back and go, it makes it a little bit interesting. Also, Herbert's health is certainly something to keep in mind. I don't think that he is going to be sat or anything like that, though. Also, shout out to Bunk Toozy 44. I hope that I was getting that one right. But the latest follow on here. Nailed it. Excellent. Thank you. I greatly appreciate that. And I appreciate the follow. I believe that gets us to 99 now. I am very bad at the, like, I feel weird in asking for follows and subs and all of those sorts of things. But if we could get that to 100, you know, Bunk did half the work there, getting us to 99. If we could get that number to 100, that would be super duper fantastic, and I would greatly appreciate it. But I love having all you guys around here and chatting some football with you. And again, if you have any questions, let me know. Bunk, I see the BC Lions logo there. I know the Lions aren't playing this week, but we do got some CFL talk coming up after we get through the NFL breakdowns here. And yes, Deeds, the welcoming committee as well. And also welcome to Deeds in the chat. I'm going to need to tidy some of this up for the podcast audio. I've just been throwing it out there, and none of this is going to make any sense to anyone listening. But still, it's fun, and I'm having a blast chatting with you guys. So let's get on to now when Pittsburgh has the football. I am surprised to see statistically some of the struggles this run game has had so far this year. They are 30th in EPA per rush. They are 29th in rushing success rate. They are running it a lot. They're just not running it successfully. And that is a little bit surprising given how dedicated they are to just running the football. But this is a team right now that is just, they're just not getting it done in any aspect of offensive football. They are 29th in rushing success rate. They are 25th in dropback success rate and 29th overall. So they are working from behind the chains an awful lot and not putting themselves in really advantageous situations. It has been very conservative so far in the passing game. The Chargers defense has been fantastic. Again, against the Raiders and against the Panthers. So how seriously can we take them? I do think that we can take them kind of seriously. Also, I would say at least the Raiders offense is better than Pittsburgh's, right? Maybe? Yeah, I would say so. The pick in this game is Pittsburgh -1. It's going to be ugly, and even under 36.5 feels a little bit tempting, quite honestly. But I think that the health of Herbert is an issue, and I think they are going to understand that running against the Raiders and the Panthers, a little bit different than running against the Steelers. In terms of fantasy, like I said before, I think you have to trust Dobbins just because he has been so good in the first couple of weeks and because the opportunities are 100% going to be there. So I think you do have to trust him this week. I am certainly trying to avoid Justin Herbert as much as I can. I know in the Vampire League with Deeds and Toxic here in the chat, I have Herbert right now, but I have made a move, and I know I also said avoid Sam Darnold, but when you're building a team entirely off the waiver wire, you got to do what you got to do. And so Sam Darnold has been a pickup for me. I believe I went Darnold this week, or I've just given everything away. But either way, try to avoid Herbert is the long story short in all of that. He has been dealing with some injuries. I am also concerned about the pass catchers then. I know we gave out Quentin Johnston as a waiver wire ad, but again, that was with the caveat that they are playing Pittsburgh this week and fantasy points aren't going to be a bountiful amount. So I would hope that you have a better option. If not, throw him out there and hopefully he finds his way, trips and falls into the end zone. For the Steelers, I think you can go with the running back duo with Najee and with Jalen Warren. I do think that the volume is going to be there, and maybe the Chargers defense is a touch overrated in the run game. Pickens should be okay, but that one's falling faster and faster every week, and in no world should you ever start Justin Fields, ever. On to Philadelphia against New Orleans, one of the more intriguing matchups of the weekend. New Orleans favored by 2.5 points with a total sitting at 49.5. When New Orleans has the football, big things have been happening. They have made some big changes in terms of motion, in terms of the use of play action. They feel faster with Shaheed busting down the sidelines. Olave has room. Kamara has fixed his legs, so that's nice. There has been a lot going on with this team so far. I do wonder what it looks like when there is some resistance from the other team, when they aren't just blowing a team out of the water or facing a better defense. Because I do think, like, Carolina week 1, woof. and Dallas week 2, I do think as the season goes along, while that was impressive, don't get me wrong, it's going to look a little bit less impressive. I do think Philadelphia's defense, while flawed, is going to put up a bit more of a resistance. And so I am very interested to see how New Orleans is able to move the ball against the Philadelphia team that has given up some yards to Atlanta and to Green Bay in the first couple of weeks. They are 31st in defensive DVOA. So it hasn't been the prettiest so far defensively. So there is an opportunity here for New Orleans maybe to put up some numbers. But I do still think that this is a little smoke and mirrors, and we're gonna look back at like week 10, like, oh man. Remember we thought the Saints were going to win the Super Bowl for a couple of weeks there? That was wild. When Philadelphia has the ball, the offenses move the ball really well through the air, and realistically, they are one drop away from being 2-0. And everyone, I think, viewing this team quite a bit differently. And I think, honestly, this team being favored in this game. New Orleans defense, though, is legit. Dennis Allen, I think he sucks as a head coach, although this year is going well. But I do think that he knows how to coach up a defense. So this is going to be, I think, it's going to be a really, really interesting game. I still have to go with Philadelphia. I don't think I can change my mind so much over 2 weeks that I can get to New Orleans being a team that can beat the Eagles here. And so I am going to go, going to take the points and the Eagles. Also, we're going to get a player prop in here. We're going to go Alvin Kamara over 65.5 rushing yards. Philadelphia's defense is 31st in EPA per rush and 27th in defensive rush success rate. So they've been kind of gashed up a little bit. Now, that's Josh Jacobs and it's Bijan Robinson, but this is Alvin Kamara. So I think that a good game could be had for Kamara. In terms of fantasy, the Eagles have given up the 11th most points to fantasy quarterbacks. I would say you can start Carr and feel good about it. Kamara is for sure a play. Olave is as well. I do think Shaheed can come up with a couple of big plays in this game and justify him being owned. Taysom Hill, it hasn't really clicked yet, although if you have him, you probably have to start him because who in their right mind owns 2 tight ends? Philadelphia, this is a team you play your studs. Jalen Hurts, yes. Barkley, yes. Smith, yes. Check on A.J. Brown's health status. Obviously, if he's not playing, don't. But he is someone who I think you can start relatively confidently. On to Green Bay against Tennessee. The Titans are favored by 2 points. They, of the variety of team that traded Malik Willis away for a 7th round pick. So they know what they are getting into facing this Green Bay Packers offense here this week. Tennessee's defense has actually been pretty solid. They're 9th in DVOA right now. The defense has played well enough to have this team be 2-0. It has been a couple of mistakes from Will Levis week in and week out that have kind of hurt this team. And there was the shot on the sideline of the coach being like, hey, what the fuck are you doing? And that, becomes a bit of an issue. But I do think defensively you can trust this team. And also, we know that out in Indianapolis with Gus Bradley, it's 3 high zone, right? Like that, we're going to play our way and we're going to make we're going to, no matter what you do, we can still play our way and we're going to dictate to you. Well, that didn't work against Green Bay. I do think Tennessee is going to make any adjustment and probably limit things for the Packers in this game. So I do have some worries about Green Bay offensively. When Tennessee has the ball, Levis has turned it over in some really difficult spots. And like I said, they should be 2-0. And obviously, if they won those 2 games, I think they'd probably be a sizable favorite. In these games. Tony Pollard has also found his legs so far this season. He has been a bit of a beast, and so that has been interesting to see. It is going up against a pretty good run defense out in Green Bay so far this year. The pick, though, is the Titans -2. I know we got bit by this last week, but the fact that I only have to win by 2 against Malik Willis feels good. Feels solid. Feels like a win. So we're going to go Tennessee -2. From a fantasy standpoint, I have trouble trusting the Green Bay weapons aside from Josh Jacobs. If you have to play any of the receivers, then I guess go for it. But I have a very difficult time trusting any of those guys right now. And even honestly, Jacobs, I think maybe hits a bit of a wall this week, but you have to play him based on, A, where you drafted him, and B, how well he has played so far this season. And on the Tennessee side, I do think like Pollard over Spears is definitely the move here. Spears is kind of now a wait and see. And I actually have it written down here. He is a must sit right now. It hasn't clicked for him, and it really has for Pollard. That has been interesting. Ridley is probably the only Tennessee player you can trust. I think with Hopkins, his next best game is going to be on my bench before I see what he is really ready to do. New York Giants taking on the Cleveland Browns. This game's going to suck. We don't need to go too far into this one. The Giants' offense has been abysmal. Their defense has been worse. Yeah, they are 25th in offensive DVOA, 26th in defensive DVOA, which puts them 29th overall. Taking on the Cleveland Browns, 12th in defensive DVOA, 29th in offense, 27th in defense overall. It's just going to be ugly. It's just going to be so bad. The Giants are basically bottom 6 in every offensive category I look at. Cleveland's defense is 12th and top 10 in a lot of areas. 12th overall in DVOA, but top 10 in a lot of interesting areas defensively. When Cleveland has the ball, the offense has been dreadful, but so has the Giants' defense. So honestly, I have no idea. But looking at this game, Cleveland shouldn't be a touchdown favorite against anyone. And so, just on principle alone, I am taking Giants minus 6.5 and just hoping to God that Scott Hansen doesn't shift to this game too much during Red Zone this week, because it's going to be gross. From a fantasy standpoint, the Giants have allowed the 8th most points to running backs this year, so I think you can trust Jerome Ford this week. Other than that, no. Amari Cooper, it hasn't clicked so far this year. Judy has actually been okay, so maybe there's something going on there, maybe in a flex option, and in deeper leagues, Cooper you can go to as well. Neighbors is the only Giant that should even be rostered. Wan'Dale Robinson in deeper-ish leagues, maybe, but yeah, no, it's this game's gonna suck. It's going to be very bad. And even if it's exciting at the end, like it's turned into this Wild West shootout and Watson and Jones are just exchanging touchdowns, it's still going to be a bad game. It's just going to be an exciting game. There is a difference. Chicago taking on the Indianapolis Colts. Colts favored by 1.5. The over-under is at 43.5. Chicago's offense has underdelivered so far. Caleb Williams, it hasn't looked great. And I heard on a podcast today, they were saying, like, if Caleb Williams didn't come in with the former Heisman pedigree and the number 1 overall pick pedigree and all of those things, he'd probably be, like, close to getting benched, honestly, right now. It didn't look great in either of the first 2 games. It looked better in the second game, but that's just because the first game was so abysmal. They're 31st in DVOA. They are 30th in EPA per dropback and 29th in dropback success rate. The Colts haven't really put up great numbers defensively either, although they faced the Texans and the Packers. Now, they faced the Packers, who had Malik Willis, and it's concerning how much trouble they had limiting him. So I do think there is an opportunity here for Chicago to get right. Again, as I said, the Indianapolis Colts do not make many adjustments defensively. They have their game plan and they make it fit in every game that they play. And for 2 years, it hasn't worked. I don't know why they would change that now. Even though we saw on Sunday night that if you just hit one more guy into that line, you're going to blow up everything they do, because this is 1932 in Chicago. And it's like, a blitz in this economy? You aren't used to that, apparently. So I am so fascinated with this side of the ball because of how bad it has looked for Chicago, but how bad I think the Indianapolis Colts are. When Indy has the ball, the offense is 10th in DVOA, but 23rd in dropback success rate. So they are putting up some big plays, but when it comes to like actually moving the football, it's just not clicking for them right now. Chicago's defense has been excellent so far. They gave Houston some troubles, and that offense is better than the Colts. And so because of the Chicago defense, I think the Bears get the win here. Again, Jim Ross would describe this one as bowling shoe ugly, but this is absolutely a game that I think the Bears defense gets in the win. I'm going Bears money line on this one as my official pick for this game. By the way, I should kind of clarify, I don't actually bet on all of these. I have some picks to click that I still am only going to give podcast-wise, just because I am slightly unsure on the gambling rules on Twitch. And so but I do a pick per game just to kind of force us to make at least one call in this game. But then I have some picks to click that I will give out podcast-wise as a podcast exclusive. There we go. From a fantasy football standpoint, DJ Moore is basically the only Bear that I am trusting. Maybe Keenan Allen, but it sounds like he is out in this game, so no. I'm not trusting the running backs, and Lord help you if you have to trust Caleb Williams, even against that Colts defense that I obviously have very minimal respect for. For Indianapolis, I would try to find someone else other than Anthony Richardson this week, just based on how good I think Chicago's defense is going to be. You probably have to start Pittman, but I'm not trusting any other Colts pass catcher. And Jonathan Taylor is kind of the only one that you trust on a week-in, week-out basis. Miami taking on Seattle. The Seahawks are favored by 4.5 points with a total at 41.5. When Miami has the ball, there's obviously some concern right now. Skylar Thompson is in. Tua Tagovailoa is out. I will say, this offense kind of looked bad with Tua, even. They just got past Jacksonville in week 1, and they just got curb stomped by Buffalo in week 2. So it's not like you have had this high-powered machine, not like Bunk Toozy 44, who has the BC Lions, and everything was rolling with Vernon Adams, and then all of a sudden there's an injury, and now then you have Jake Dolegala coming in for a week, and then, the Rorik stuff and all that. But this isn't that. This is an offense that was struggling, that has now taken a significant step backwards in the quarterback position. Yes, that Nate guy for BC now. But this is a significant downgrade. No matter what you think of Tua, everyone outside of the Skylar Thompson household thinks that Tua is a better quarterback than Skylar Thompson. So this sucks for Miami's offense. I have some concerns. Seattle's defense has been excellent so far. Their defensive stats are very, very good. Now, they've played Denver and New England. I do think that this is going to be an improved defense, and this is one of those ones where confirmation bias can get you, because you see the stats for Seattle. They are 5th in defensive DVOA, they are 7th in defensive EPA, and 3rd in defensive success rate. And so I assumed coming into the year, new coach, some young pieces building up on this defense, this was going to be a good defense. And so when you see for 2 weeks those numbers, it's like, okay, defense is good. They played Jacoby Brissett and Bo Nix. Now, they made them both look like doo-doo, but still, I do have just the slightest bit of concern about what happens when they have a real offense to face. Now again, it's Skylar Thompson this week, so we're not exactly going up into the Hall of Fame level for quarterbacks, but I am interested in this one. Bunk Toozy's NFL team, the Seattle Seahawks. I guess I should have assumed. We have a very Todd Bertuzzi themed name, and we are BC Lions fans, so I should have assumed West Coast, Best Coast thing going on with the Seattle Seahawks. And Bunk says, now, if only the offense can get going. That has certainly been a bit of a thing. Seattle, they've been effective-ish. The stats, they are 6th in DVOA. They haven't been able to run the ball for shit, apparently. But they are 9th in EPA per dropback, 28th in EPA per run. I guess Charbonnet had a bit of a rough go there with Kenneth Walker banged up. But they've been able to move the ball. And again, while we are kind of taking a shot at the Denver and New England offenses, those defenses are pretty good. New England's quite good, although last night didn't really show that. But we expect both those defenses to be pretty good. And so I do think that while Bunk here is a little bit worried about Seattle's offense, I'm not. I think Geno is fine. DK Metcalf is a beast. I really like Jackson Smith and Jigba and Tyler Lockett. I do think this offense is really going to start clicking. We have a ticket with Seattle to win this division, and I'm not worried about it right now. It does seem like a bit of a sucker play here. Like Seattle going up against Skylar Thompson, it feels like they should be favored by more than 4.5. And so this one kind of feels like found money, but my pick for this game is Seattle minus 4.5. On a fantasy standpoint, I think you have to trust your studs with the Dolphins. Achane, you have to. Tyreek Hill, you have to. Waddle, you have to. Like, you just drafted those guys in places where you have to trust them. I wouldn't start Skylar Thompson if I was being held at gunpoint. I would have some concerns about that. I do worry about Mostert if he is healthy. I don't know if I would be starting him anyway. Hello there, Big Mako, or Mako. Apologies if I got that one wrong. But yeah, either way, like I think you are starting your main Dolphins here. If Mostert is healthy, which I don't think he will be, it sounds like he is doubtful for this game, but that would be an avoidance for me. For the Seahawks, I think you can trust the weapons. If Walker is healthy, I think you put him in. Charbonnet, I think still, even with Walker in there, gets a little bit of volume. Obviously, DK Metcalf is a freak of nature and should be in your fantasy lineups always. Lockett and JSN, I'm a little worried that it's kind of your turn, my turn, and just kind of dependent on how defenses try to limit them. But I do think both of them, as this offense starts to kind of figure out what it is in picking up the pace a little bit this year, I do think both those guys have some value. Carolina against the Vegas Raiders. The Raiders are my favorite team, just for the new people in the chat. So if you're concerned about some bias, there is definitely some. When Carolina has the ball, Andy Dalton is going to be the one under center. He's at least going to be a little bit more competent, but I feel like we are kind of overdoing a couple of things. This isn't just this unbelievable team that shoddy quarterback play has significantly limited over the last couple of weeks. This is genuinely one of the worst football teams ever assembled. And yeah, the quarterback's been dog shit, but so has almost everybody else. And so Andy Dalton coming in here doesn't fix everything right away. They are abysmal in every area of the sport. And I'm saying all of this, they're going to beat the Raiders by 10 now. But like they are a really, really bad team. And so yes, Andy Dalton's going to come in and do his thing. But God damn, if people are, oh, well, look at that. Like the line, when they put Dalton in, the line went from Raiders -7, which was probably too high anyway, for reasons we'll explain in a second, to Raiders -4.5 here. And the total, sorry, I think I forgot to give this out. The total's at 40.5. Like, what do we think Andy Dalton's going to do with this team? I guess, like, complete some passes. But I have some concerns about Andy Dalton in this offense. From a Raiders standpoint, defensively, they've been pretty good against the Chargers, who offensively aren't, and the Ravens, who offensively are. So it's been all right for the Raiders. When Vegas has the ball, they were at least able to get it moving against the Baltimore Ravens. They got just shut down by the Chargers in week 1. But Minshew is getting a little bit more comfortable with just, fuck it, I'll throw it to Devontae Adams. And he has certainly found something in Brock Bowers. This team can move the ball a little bit, and I have some faith that they're going to be able to get that done, because again, Carolina's defense, the drizzling shits. So my official pick for this game is Raiders -4.5. I also would look at Brock Bowers over 44.5. From a fantasy standpoint, if you're desperate, Deontay Johnson. And if you're super desperate, Chuba Hubbard. That's it. Only if you're desperate or if you're playing in like a 95-team league. For the Raiders, Bowers is obviously, like, he is a must-start every week at tight end. You probably don't have multiple tight ends, so most tight ends on your roster are must-starts every week. Adams is a beast, and Myers is fine. There is no running back that you want on this team. Alexander Madison's the best running back that they have. That should concern you. But yeah, big Mako. We are running with the Raiders here this week. Also, I should let you know that because the Raiders are my favorite team, I do a team specific podcast just for the Vegas Raiders, not live, but just on the Couch Potato Diary podcast feed, and also on the Couch Potato Diary YouTube channel. It's like 15 minutes every week on those, but I do that for a few of my favorite teams as their seasons kind of go on. Baltimore against Dallas, a marquee matchup of holy shit, these teams need to win. Baltimore is favored by a point. The total is at 48.5. Both of these teams have underperformed, I would say, to start this season. Let's start when Dallas has the ball. The offense had a big night against Cleveland, but really struggled against New Orleans. I think that there was a lot going on in Cleveland, and I think, like, New Orleans isn't as good as Dallas made them out to be, but I don't think Dallas's offense is as good as Cleveland made them look. So I do think that there's going to be a happy medium. I do think Dallas can move the ball a little bit, but I don't think, honestly, and if you guys, for those of you who are new, in the preseason previews that we did, I am not on this Cowboys team at all. I think that they are severely lacking talent on both sides of the football. And so I don't think they're going to lose by 20 every week. I think they are certainly more the team that played New Orleans than the team that played Cleveland. For Baltimore, this defense has given up a few good games. And so this is a really interesting matchup with a Cowboys offense that still, it's Dak, it's CeeDee, they have their guys. But I don't think very highly of them. And a Ravens defense that I do think you at least have to take a little bit seriously. But it was one of the things I said I was worried I was wrong about in the preseason. Queen leaving to go to Pittsburgh. I know I keep harping on this, but that is such a huge loss. And I don't know if they've been able to really figure out how to manage that yet. They have had some struggles in allowing teams to move the ball on you. M. Cronsley, I see the fantasy question. I will get to that in just a brief moment. When Baltimore has the ball, this offense has moved things really, really well. They just haven't been able to finish drives so far. Baltimore is 24th in offensive DVOA, but they are 9th in EPA per run. And so I do think that this is a team that can move the football here. Dallas's defense has been all over the place. They are 5th in defensive success rate. They are 30th in defensive rush success rate. But Alvin Kamara will do that to you. So they've been able to limit successful passes, but haven't been able to limit successful runs at all. You kind of need to do that against Baltimore. And so again, this is such a Baltimore at 0-3. Would be a disaster. Dallas at 1-2, and ESPN is leading First Take on Monday with Bill Belichick, Mike Vrabel, Bill Belichick, right? Like that's the conversations that are being had. So this is a gigantic game. I think the Ravens are better. And so I'm going to go with Baltimore -1. Also a prop. We're going to go Lamar over 213.5 passing yards. All right. M. Cronsley, I think I'm saying that right. M. Cronsley in the chat. PPR, would you start Zach Charbonnet over either James Conner or James Cook, or keep those two? Very interesting question. You have Conner going up against Detroit, who's actually been pretty good against the run so far this year. James Cook with Buffalo. They are going up against Jacksonville. I still think like Charbonnet looked a little bit last week. I know it PPR, so that does make it a little bit more enticing for Charbonnet to start over Conner and over James Cook. I do think I would go Conner and Cook still over Charbonnet. Conner has just looked so good, and that offense has looked really, really good. And he is involved in the passing game. It's not his biggest weapon, but he's involved in the passing game. Cook, I think they would like to get him a little bit more involved in the pass, but he is certainly getting a lot of opportunities running the football. And so I do think those guys are the way to go. So I would go Conner and Cooks and Bunk. To your point, I have Connors in a 16-team keeper league that I am in, and he has been so much fun to watch so far. And so Charbonnet, while I do think there is something there, I just have a little bit of a concern about a lack of productivity last week. So I will go Conner and Cook. From a fantasy standpoint, in Baltimore against Dallas, I think you start your studs here. We're not sitting Lamar Jackson ever, right? But Derrick Henry, I think you can trust him here. Mark Andrews is back in the circle of trust after being okay last week. And Zay Flowers is a go for Baltimore. On Dallas, Prescott, I do think they're going to be able to move the ball here. So I will go Prescott. I do think you can trust Zeke a little bit and CeeDee Lamb for sure. And then like the tight ends, Ferguson, again. You probably have to, just because who has two tight ends. San Francisco taking on the LA Rams. The Niners are favored by 7 points. The total is at 43.5. An interesting development, as it sounds like George Kittle is going to be out for this game. So no CMC, no Deebo Samuel, no Kittle. Does sound like Ayuk is coming into this game. He is probably going to be sextuple teamed when he is out there, because who else are you throwing to? But this is Kyle Shanahan. And it's Brock Purdy, who's been playing some decent football to start this season. So I do think that there is still something going for this team, although the offense has gotten off to a bit of a slow start. The Rams, speaking of James Conner, got obliterated last week by the Arizona Cardinals. And now, I don't think, given the limitations that San Francisco has offensively, that they are the Arizona Cardinals, which, boy, did we think we'd be saying that 3 weeks into the year? No. But I do think that this is a team that struggles defensively, we will say. And wouldn't you know it, losing Aaron Donald isn't great for the old defensive stats going forward. So be careful for just be careful if you're trusting the Rams in this spot. When the LA Rams have the ball, I don't think they're shedding any tears for the issues that San Francisco has. This offense is dealing with some issues as well with Puka Nacua and with Cooper Kupp. And so Kyron Williams is basically the only guy you trust on this offense. San Francisco's defense, underlying numbers don't look amazing, but the talent is certainly there. This is going to be, I think, a rock fight of a game. And so I think it goes under 43.5. From a fantasy standpoint, I do think Mason is the guy in San Francisco. He'll get some. Ayuk is going to probably step up, and I think Juwan Johnson works his way. He was a waiver wire pickup this week. I think that's the way you go. For the Rams, Williams may be the guy, and that's about it. Anyone else, you're fishing in guys that you're just not comfortable with, and I would have to think you have some other options. Deed's reminding us that Ferguson is listed as questionable. So, yes, watch that status. This is a 2 o'clock game, I believe, so be a little bit careful with that. Because you don't want to have to go out and pick up the San Francisco backup tight end, whoever that may be. Also, I missed this as we were going along, but we have reached 100 followers. So I didn't catch the name of who did that, but thank you very much to everyone here who has given me a follow. I really do appreciate that. On to the Arizona Cardinals taking on the Detroit Lions. The Lions are favored by 2.5 points. The total is at 51.5. When Arizona has the ball, big things happen. They are third in EPA per play and third in EPA per dropback. Harrison getting rolling is really, really good. Kyler looks amazing and looks like the guy who we believed in when we had a Arizona to make the playoffs ticket from the beginning of the year. Detroit had some issues with the Rams offense back in their week 1 game. And that's looking a little bit more concerning. Even when Cooper Kupp was healthy, that offense just got whooped on by Arizona defensively. And so that makes you just kind of furrow the brow a little bit at what's going on in Detroit. I thought that this was going to be a defense that was improved. And I mean, they got after Baker Mayfield. They still lose, giving up 20 points. But the 5 sacks by Hutchinson, he is just an absolute beast. So it's going to be an interesting test for the offensive line out in Arizona. When Detroit has the ball, the passing game hasn't been as effective so far this season. Detroit is 18th in offensive DVOA. They are 25th in EPA per dropback. Goff has kind of looked like old Goff again, and that has been a concern for this team. And I do think that a little bit of it is you have this new shiny toy in Jameson Williams, who on our preview shows we were big upping all preseason. I don't know if Goff knows how to use it. They have not used Sam Laporta effectively at all so far this year. Amon-Ra St. Brown, who is still the best player on this team, is what was overly limited in week 1, and then they kind of got him back going in week 2, but that kind of took away from Williams. So I think he is just figuring out how to distribute everything. But he's not great at that. So I do worry that this offense is going to take a little bit of time to click, much like the defense has taken some time. The Cardinals, they are not a good defense, but they are an improved defense, and they gave the Rams a bit of a trouble last week, although, again, the injury issues are what they are with the Rams. But this is, I think, it's not a good defense in Arizona. And so this could be a get-right spot here for Detroit's offense. But overall, I like Arizona in this spot. I'll take Arizona plus 2.5. I think Kyler goes out and gets it done, and we have a lot of conversations about how seriously we need to take the Arizona Cardinals. Also, Jahmyr Gibbs, over 49.5 yards on the ground. Arizona's run defense right now is 32nd. Is 25th in run success rate. So it hasn't been great to start the year. We'll be waiting all day for Sunday night. Oh no, I didn't do the fantasy part. Sorry. Such a big build-up and everything. I do think from a fantasy standpoint, you're starting almost everyone in this game, right? We just said Connor over Charbonnet. For the Lions, Goff has struggled, but this is a really, really interesting matchup against Arizona. Montgomery and Gibbs, we just talked about Arizona struggles against the run. Williams, because he is a big play threat. Amon-Ra St. Brown, because he is good. And Laporta, because you drafted him in the 2nd round. So those are the guys. Again, watch for injuries and all that, but those are the guys. For the Cardinals, it's Kyler for sure. He this week is a must start. Connor is a start, even though the Lions have allowed the second fewest points to running backs so far this year. I do think that the electricity of this offense is going to get him going a little bit there. And that like Harrison and McBride are no-brainers. And even for deeper leagues, Michael Wilson is kind of the play. He hasn't got the boatload of the targets yet, but he's been out there for a lot of plays, and I think that starts to kind of click. All right, now, Sunday Night Football. It'll be Kansas City taking on the Atlanta Falcons. The Chiefs favored by 3. The total is at 46.5. Kansas City's offense had some issues as Cincinnati's defense is generally one to do. They give them some problems sometimes. And I'm not super sure I'm high on Cincinnati's defense, so I have some concerns about that. It was a bit more like last year, where just moving the ball was kind of hard for them to do. Hopefully that was just a blip, because they looked really good against Baltimore in week 1. I'll be interested to see how they do with no Pacheco. Atlanta's defense has been kind of middle of the road, 17th in defensive DVOA. They did face Pittsburgh, who was bland, and Philadelphia without Brown. I do think it's a good defense, but I don't know if they've really proven it just yet. When Atlanta has the ball, they moved the ball well late last week against Philadelphia, and Cousins looked better. They are 8th in DVOA and 7th in dropback success rate and are still getting things figured out. Kansas City's defense, they've given up big yards to tight ends, and so the thought would be Pitts is the guy. I am interested in how they play this, because I kind of feel like in week 1 likely, and in week 2 Gesicki, it was more what Kansas City was taking away than necessarily a vulnerability against the tight end. In week 1, they doubled Mark Andrews basically anytime he set foot on the field and left it so it's like, yeah, okay, if you're going to beat us with likely, you're going to beat us with likely. Fine. In week 2, they had McDuffie on Jamar Chase and really did a good job in limiting him. And it's like, okay, if you're going to go to Gesicki, go to Gesicki. Fine. Pitts is a bit of a different weapon than Gesicki and likely. And so I do wonder how much of that coverage goes there and what they are able to do. And so I think defensively, we might see another kind of shadow game here for McDuffie, put him on London, have a little bit more focus then in kind of maybe a double team type of a situation on Kyle Pitts, and try to make the rest of them beat you. That kind of feels like the game plan. So I don't know on the surface, like Pitts may still have a good game, but like on the surface, it looks like, oh, Kansas City's dog shit against the tight end. But in thinking about it a little bit more this week and listening to some podcasts and those different things, it's like, well, maybe this was more the strategy than just, oh, we're dog shit against tight end. And so that being said, I do wonder if there is a Mooney game in here. I do think Kansas City wins, and I do think they cover. 2 close wins against teams who know them well might be skewing things a little bit, so I think Kansas City covers. Also, we'll be going with Mooney over 34.5 run yards, and London under 61.5 in the receiving yards. Shout out to Sakuragi himself. The following is a Twitch live stream presentation of HBO Sports Network of Champions. There is some boxing talk coming up. Watching the Canelo fight the other day. I know I'm tangent now. He's here, or they are here after watching some throwback fights. Watching the Canelo fight and seeing one of the shots where he's celebrating, and there's the HBO thing up in the thing. It's like, man, I miss HBO boxing. You know, like Boxing After Dark, where you get some of those things, the big pay-per-view events, and then a week later, it's on free TV, and that's so much fun. I miss HBO boxing, and I'll get into some of that more a little bit as we get into the boxing stuff. As far as fantasy football goes, for the Kansas City Chiefs, you gonna sit Mahomes? No, of course not. I do think you have to give Worthy another shot along with Rice and Kelsey. I'd rather go with P. Ryan in the running back room and just kind of see what Steele is, just kind of a wait and see. But I would rather not have to start P. Ryan at all, quite frankly. On the Atlanta side, Cousins should do okay against Kansas City's defense, 23rd in defensive EPA per play and 22nd in DVOA. Robinson has been 82% or has had 82% of the running back snaps for the Falcons this year. He is a must start every week. And if we were redrafting today, he'd probably be the number 1 player in fantasy. I do think you have to start London, even if I do think it's going to be an off game. You also have to start Pitts because, again, do we have 2 tight ends? And also, I do think Mooney is a play because he has a good game. Deeds letting us know that just an update, Ferguson has just had his status move to healthy. So he is good to go for this one. Monday Night Football, the first of 2. It is Jacksonville taking on Buffalo. The Bills favored by 5.5 with the total at 45.5. Jacksonville has struggled, but They're a couple plays away from being 2-0. If Etienne doesn't fumble going into the end zone against Miami, and if there is, if they don't have some of the issues they have against Cleveland, then they're 2-0. Now, Cleveland's defense is good. Everyone's going to have issues with them, but they at least should be 1-1. Aside from Thomas, though, they don't really have big playmakers this year. The run game has struggled, although Miami and Cleveland are defenses we expect to be relatively good against those. Buffalo's defense had some struggles against Arizona, but, like, who hasn't? They regrouped against Miami and just absolutely annihilated them. But overall, I do think they can be beat, and I do think we're overestimating them a little bit. Remember, all the talk in the offseason, oh, well, Milano's hurt. This defense can't do anything. Oh, well, this guy's hurt. They can't. Oh, there's all these changes. And then a couple of weeks, they look good. Oh, no, it's the Buffalo Bills. Here they go again. Like, I can't buy into them in that way. Just yet. We'll see what they do here this week. When Buffalo has the ball, Josh Allen has been tremendous. He is, I think, second or third in potential MVP voting right now. I do think that there is a... I think he's at plus 450 right now, which is interesting, I think. But neither here nor there. Jacksonville has had some good defensive success rate numbers, and so that does make me think that there could be a little bit of a bounce back here for them, and they may give Buffalo a few issues. Jacksonville, plus 5.5 is the play here. I think this is a gigantic game for them. They cannot afford to go 0-3, and I think they come back with a big bounce back game. I don't think they win, but I think they keep this game really, really close. Toxic and Deeds, for those who are kind of new around here, they are chatting about the Vampire League that we have. I see Toxic has made some moves as he's gone out and picked up Jerry Jeudy. And so I'm the Vampire in this league, but yeah, we did a Vampire League with some of the Twitch followers and people in the chat. And yes, the Vampire League, I think I made it have 4. If nothing else, to give me a fighting chance against some guys so that I can just like race out like, okay, well that guy, yeah, let's bring him in. That guy, let's bring him in. But I also didn't anticipate that y'all would get to use those as well and maybe limit me in what I am able to do. Okay, from a fantasy standpoint, I don't know if there's a whole lot to feel great about with Jacksonville this week. It's not a Lawrence game if you can avoid it. I do like Thomas. It doesn't scream must start, but I just think he is talented and would like to have him in my lineup. And I don't know if I really trust any of the other weapons right now. ETN, based on where he was drafted, you have to start. And God, that is so annoying because all last year, I was so out on ETN. And then this year, it's like, you know what? He showed it to me. He's good. He's in the circle of trust now. And now he's been dog shit for 2 games. What the hell, man? For the Bills, it's obvious. Allen is a go. Cook is at a 55% snap share in that backfield. And so to M. Cronsley's point, this is a guy who is getting so many opportunities that I think you just kind of have to roll with him right now. No one has really separated themselves in the wide receiver room here just yet. Shakir has the best target share. Coleman has the best snap share and the best red zone target share. But that means he has 2 red zone targets and everyone else only has 1. And you probably have to start Kincaid. Sakuragi, I will get to the HBO stuff. We have boxing coming up here in just a little bit. But yes, HBO boxing, unbelievable. And then 2002 would have been a great time to get into that. Washington taking on Cincinnati. Last game on the slate. Cincinnati minus 7.5 for the total at 46.5. When Washington has the ball, they've actually been okay. Like they are 4th in EPA per play, 5th in success rate, 5th in EPA per dropback, 3rd in dropback success rate, and 4th in EPA per run. The issue, they haven't scored at all. And this is one of those ones. We talked about it with the Giants last week. Yes, the Giants only gave up 21 points to Washington. That was 7 scoring drives. And so I am, A, thinking it's a positive for Washington that you had 7 scoring drives, but B, a little bit concerned that you needed 7 field goals and couldn't punch it in the end zone against the less than vaunted defense of the New York, by God, Giants. So I don't think I'm taking this offense too seriously right now. I do think they'll be able to move the ball a little bit with Daniels and probably his legs. It's just finishing drives. That's an issue. Cincinnati's defense did well last week. They still looked a little bit shaky. I think they have a smart group that will be able to kind of limit things here for Daniels. When Cincinnati has the ball, it has been not an overly dynamic offense. They are 21st right now in offensive DVOA. The running metrics look good. Moss himself hasn't looked all that good, like just tape-wise, but the stats are looking all right for this group right now. And the Commanders have one of the worst defenses the sport has ever seen. So I do think Cincinnati gets this done. I would like to think that the Commanders offense might be able to get this thing going, but that defense is just so bad that I think you have to go with Cincinnati here. Daniels, he could be a weapon this week when we transition into the fantasy talk. Cincinnati has limited fantasy scoring for quarterbacks, but they did face Jacoby Brissett in week 1. So how much can you trust that? Brian Robinson has a 45% attempt share in this backfield right now for Washington. So he is, I think, the only other option that I'm looking to start this week. Even like Daniels probably wouldn't be the guy I would want to go with. For the Bengals, you start Burrow, you start Chase, and you start Moss. Brown has only had 26% of the snaps in this backfield so far. So it's a late round gamble that hasn't really paid off yet. I do think he has looked better, but that's a big gap to bridge. And Mike Gesicki is an option as the tight end. So there you go. Every game in the NFL broken down. That took a while. So thank you guys for sitting through it with me here.